So our next speaker is Damon Parrish II. He has made his life's work to focus on the representation of the indigent persons in criminal matters, especially those with mental health issues. Damon is a senior litigator and team leader. He is an assistant public defender with the Harris County Public Defender's Office. Damon is also a member of various professional organizations and associations, including Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association, Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association, National Association of Public Defenders, and National Association of Black Public Defenders, and has spoken at numerous legal functions, churches, and social events on criminal legal issues affecting the community. Mr. Parrish will now highlight his experiences as an attorney working with individuals with mental health needs, or IDD, and the techniques he has found to best understand and serve his clients. I do want to remind everyone, we need to be heard when we ask our questions, because I know we can hear each other in this room, but the people on the live stream can't, even when we're loud. So go to the mic for your questions when it's that time, and then we'll all be able to virtually as well as in person participate most effectively. Thank you so much, and Mr. Parrish.
Thank you. Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Everybody hear it? Good. I'm a dynamic speaker. I like audience participation, so feel free to talk, yell, interject, or whatever. I'm going to move around a lot because I can't stand still. So the title of this presentation in the packet is Dealing with Mentally Ill Clients from a Defense Attorney Perspective, from a defense perspective. And I think it's a great topic. It's got a lot of information. And I could probably speak with every speaker that's talked here with them about that perspective and add to it. There's a lot of information. I hope I get to it all. I will definitely leave some stuff out, so feel free to jump in if you need to. Now, one of the first things I'm gonna ask you guys, and you guys are all judges, right? And you look at this picture and you're probably thinking to yourself, this is my client. This is a client. This is a person. Mind jumbled, so much stuff going on. But in effect, this is me. This is the defense attorney. This is what we go through. And I'm gonna ask you guys as judges, as court staff, as those people who are not client-facing like we are, to give us a little patience with our clients, right? There's a tug of war going on with these cases here. There's the criminal side, because I am a criminal defense attorney, so I have to represent the person charged with the crime. But then there's also this mental illness aspect that I have to address, I have to deal with. And I'm gonna speak later or more in depth about that, but I have to deal with it. And a lot of times what I do, and I think I pride myself well on, is I stand as a barrier in between that mental illness and that issue, that barrier, and you judges. So I might stand in front of you for 5 minutes, giving you a rundown of my client and what's going on, but believe me, that is hours, days, weeks of talking with my client, reviewing records, dealing with them, dealing with their mental illness. And so what you get is a short portion, but for me, this is like, here we go again, right? It's a lot of stuff. And so I would ask you guys, when you deal with us and you deal with this stuff, and we deal with these kind of cases, just give us as the attorney a little patience, because we are definitely working hard to make it easier for you. It may not appear that way, and you might think we're like delaying it or whatever, but there's always that balance between my ethical duty to my client as a defense attorney and my ethical duty as my client as a counselor in his mental health and my duty to the court. So now, one of the first things I would like you guys to think about in this case is this. I didn't learn this particular fact until I started practicing criminal defense and dealing with mentally ill clients. And that is, the same mental illness that usually has made them a defendant has also made them a victim, right? Unlike most social things, drugs or poverty, things like that, people don't choose to be mentally ill, Right? They don't wake up and say, I want to be schizophrenic or I want this genetic disorder. They don't do that. And one of the saddest days for me, and I've had a lot of sad days in this business, is this one moment when I was talking to one of my clients, and he was definitely mentally ill. And he had just got stabilized, and we're talking, and for a brief moment, he looked at me and he said, I don't want to be like this, right? I don't want to be like this. And there was a total look of desperation, despair, and he's like, I don't want this. Nobody wakes up and decides they want to be a criminal, right? And no one wakes up and decides they want to hear voices and live this kind of lifestyle associated with these severe mental illnesses. And so he looked at me, and for that brief moment in his eyes, there was complete desperation. And that's when I first realized he's also a victim too. And then, of course, he decomped and we went back to the hospital. And so if you can remember this part also, I'm not asking you guys to look at my clients and give them a hug and let them go, right? There's still the criminal component of their charge. But just remember that they're also usually a victim of their mental illness as well. So, thought process. When you look, I would like you guys to participate. When you look at this picture, what do you see? What color is this dress? You guys remember this? Blue. Who sees blue? All right, who sees gold? Right? Excellent. Excellent. Because this right here is one example of dealing with my clients. For those people like me who see blue, you only see blue, right? I can't look at this picture and see gold. I do not know how anybody looks at this picture and sees gold. And probably likewise, those who see gold look at it and say, where do you see blue in this dress, right? Where is it at? We all can agree, though, this is a dress, right? We all can agree that it's probably not a to the ankle dress, maybe to the knees, but we know it's a dress. So like my clients, there are things we objectively look at and we agree exist and are real. But there's that one or two things that we see differently, and we will always see differently. Doesn't mean we can't come together on it, but we'll always see it differently. Uh-oh, what happened? All right, what do you guys see here? Who sees a vase or a vase, depending if you're European? Vase, vase. Who sees two faces? Right? Difference. Difference. Who sees what in this picture? I won't even tell you what it is. Old lady. Everybody sees an old lady. Does anybody see anything else? Young lady, right? And these are just kind of like examples of things that we see, right? Obviously, these are illusions. I picked them for a reason. But they are examples of how we can all look at the exact same picture in the exact same time, in the exact same moment, and see two different things. And with my clients and with my mentally ill clients, a lot of times that is something we deal with. They look at the exact same scenario, this fact pattern, this criminal charge that I'm telling them, you have committed a crime. And they're telling me, oh no, I didn't, because, right? I'm telling them you were arrested because of this, and they're telling me, oh no, trust me, we'll be okay. And that's that disconnect we have to work through here. And if we can see how differences just in these pictures can come about, that's the disconnect we work with. So I want to talk a bit and separate mental illness from intellectual disability disorder. I am sure that's been covered. And one of the things as a presenter, it always scares me, is I don't want to present something over that you've already heard over and over again, or presume you guys know it and you don't know it. So I'm sorry if you've been defined out on these terms, but I'm going to do it again. So mental illness versus intellectual disability disorder, which I'm going to say IDD. So when you think about mental illness, you think about everything but disease, you see it, epilepsy, these sort of things. These things basically are things that impair your thought, your perception, your reality. You see mental illness. Common examples of it would be like this: anxiety disorders, So an anxiety disorder is something, a person whose response to the situation is not correct. Panic attacks. You know, why are you panicking right now? Calm down. Um, then you have schizophrenia, which is, I mean, we all know what that is. Schizophrenia. Mood disorders. You're a depression mood. You're overly sad for no reason, or you're overly happy, you're euphoric for no reason, or I wouldn't say no reason, in an inappropriate circumstance, right? Mood disorders, mental illness. Psychotic disorders, hallucinating, people who see things. And one of the most common things we see in this practice isn't so much a hallucination psychotic disorder, but a delusion. I cannot tell you how many times my clients, and it's weird, it's usually men that will tell me it's gonna be okay because I own Harris County. It's gonna be okay because my father is president of Wells Fargo and he's gonna buy the judge, don't worry about it. It's gonna be okay because the cops were there and they were on my side. And I'm like, dude, SWAT arrested you. You know, SWAT took you down. They're not on your side. And so we have that. And then on the flip side, for women, I've had several of my female clients tell me, like one lady told me, and she said it with an absolute straight face. And with so much passion that I believed her, and I got her tested. She said, Mr. Parrish, I am 14 months pregnant. I am 14 months pregnant. Now, I, as an aside, love to argue. I'm a lawyer. I love to debate. I take great pleasure in it. But there are a few things I will never debate in this world. One of which is I will never debate a woman on being pregnant. Right? So if she tells me she's pregnant, I don't believe you're 14 months pregnant, but I'm going to let you have it because I can't do that, right? I didn't really believe it though, but I wasn't going to tell her she wasn't 14 months pregnant, but I did assume that maybe she was pregnant and just got the timeline wrong. So I had the bailiffs, told the bailiffs, and they got her tested, she wasn't pregnant. And for the next 6 months, every time I saw her, she was just 14 months pregnant. And I've had that kind of situation happen with other female clients as well. Delusions. Impulse and addiction control, obviously drugs, alcohol, gambling. Impulse, we see it a lot. People who can't control their hands, violent for no reason. Personality disorders. These are the best and the worst because for the most part, personality disorders do not lead to incompetency or insanity. You just have it, right? So if you are oppositionally defiant, meaning, and I'm not gonna say it in here because it's being recorded, but you're an a-hole. You just like to fight for no reason. Everything is a battle. Like my 3-year-old child, you're OPD, right? You can't be found incompetent, but everything's a battle. And as I said earlier with patients, when I'm talking to my client with these situations, they fight us on everything. The report says this. No, it doesn't. The witness says this. No, it doesn't. The law says this. Prove it. No, it doesn't. And so it's always constantly a battle with them on what's going on. And then we come to you guys like, here's the situation. And you get a 30-second summary of it, but you just don't know how many hours I've spent repeating myself and writing the same letter, showing them the law, that type of stuff. The next one of these disorders, histrionics. Who here knows what histrionics is? Right? I saw a hand raised. Do you feel confident in saying it out loud, or do you want me to say it? I'll say it. Histrionics is a person that needs attention like lawyers, right? And it's a fantastic trait. It's one of my favorite traits, and I say that facetiously because clients with histrionics will do whatever it takes for attention. They'll fall out in court. They'll fall out in the jail. They'll start crying. Hello, how are you doing? They just start crying. And this guys and girls. This isn't just a woman thing. Please don't think I'm saying that. But just guys and girls. They'll fall out, and it's just a constant battle to like, just please, let's just talk about this case. And let's just get this over with. Let's do this, right? Histrionics. If you don't know, look it up. We probably know people that suffer from this, and we just call them like whatever, like attention seekers. But it's one of my favorites. So these are examples of mental illness, right? The core concept of things, if you can remember this, a mental illness is something typically that can be cured, not cured, but helped with medication. If you can give somebody Haldol, Risperdal, Naroxen, lithium carbonate, they probably have a mental illness. Because That's a brain chemistry off balance. And then we go to intellectual disability, which is the other side, IDD. And you can read what it says, but the main, examples of intellectual disability, you have things that you're born with: Down syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome, Fragile X syndrome, which is a mutation in a particular gene developed in babies that slows them down. So sometimes when you have kids that take a long time to learn how to walk and talk, like a 2 or 3-year-old is just not learning how to talk or walk, that could be a symptom of this. I am no doctor, but that could be a symptom of that. Fragile X syndrome. You have other genetic conditions, Tourette's, which comes in various different forms. And of course, birth defects, things like that. Those are common types of intellectual disabilities, and they all start at birth, right? And they manifest as time grows. Like mental illness, you don't see it as a child. And like other things, it's one of the only few things we deal with that get worse as you grow up, right? You can escape poverty as you grow up. If you work hard, it's possible. You can stop doing drugs or alcohol, but as you get older, you cannot get cured naturally of your mental illness or your IDD. It usually gets worse. Yes, ma'am. So yes, so I didn't, thank you. I was gonna talk about that later, but we'll talk about it right now. TBI, traumatic brain injury. If you get in a car accident, I had a client one time, it falls in IDD, by the way, I'm sorry, it's IDD. I had a client one time who was I would say normal person, right? Just an average guy, average Joe. And he was charged with a crime, he was on bond, and then he got into an accident, right? And that accident was not of his fault, but he lost part of his brain because of it. So now he has TBI. He has traumatic brain injury. His brain will never be the same. At that point in time, when I first met him in court, he was dressed in a button-down shirt and slacks. 6 months later, after he's out of the hospital, I see him, and he's with his caregiver. He's sitting in a T-shirt and blue jean pants, and he literally had no idea what was going on, right? TBI. So the next thing about this, TBI, traumatic brain injury, and these diseases, there is no amount of medication or social conditioning that can cure these things. You cannot make the brain better. You lose part of your brain, it is gone, and that's it. Part of your brain is damaged, it is damaged, and that's it. Haldol, Risperdal, all these classes, lingo, bingo, all that stuff they do at the hospitals, none of it helps, right? You can't fix that. So clients with IDD take a totally different track when it comes to mental illness. Right now, my presentation is kind of focused on incompetency, insanity, and that track, because IDD is totally different. If you have IDD and it's diagnosed, for sure, you're charged with a violent crime or whatever, you're probably gonna go to Mejia, Texas. There's a school in Mejia, Texas. There's a school called Mejia School, and it's where we send everybody in Texas with IDD, and that's just kind of where they live. And that's just a totally different track. So, one of the things that we look for, or you can look for with people with IDD as well, is they find it hard to remember things. They have a hard time understanding social rules, right? For instance, this is Texas. And I firmly believe that the handshake in Texas serves a lot of functions, but one of which is to establish how far you can get to me without busting my personal bubble, right? I extend my hand right here, you got to right here. Do not, come next to me while we're talking to each other. Who likes that, right? It's Texas. So I shake my hand, you know to stop right here. COVID has flipped that, so now we do elbow bumps, which makes it awkward because now you stand next to somebody's face, or we wave. And that's even worse. It's kind of awkward when you see somebody from a distance and you walk into them and they wave at you. So you're like, okay. And so y'all are waving at each other as you walk to each other. Very awkward. But people who have a hard time understanding social rules, social bubbles, that kind of stuff, those dynamics, they have a hard time seeing the results of their actions because they don't understand it. That part of the brain doesn't link. and they have a hard time solving problems. So when I get a client, and I work in the mental health docket, so sometimes I get clients that are already diagnosed. They're given to me with the understanding this person has this crime and this mental illness, and they're in our docket. Other times I get consulted. People call me and say, hey, Damon, I think my client is this. Can you come talk to him for me? Can we go together? Because I need to know, is this client mentally ill or just an oppositionally defined a-hole? Is this client mentally ill or are they just histrionics, right? Are they faking it because they are, or is it real? So one of the things I go and we look to is things like this. We see it. They have a problem thinking clearly and concentrating. Suspiciousness of other people. And you see the list, right? I'm not going to read it to you. You see it. But one of the things I want to make clear on this list is some of the same things that exist here also are used by law enforcement to establish guilt. How many times do you hear cops say he didn't make eye contact, right? I knew he was lying because he wouldn't look me in my face. Eye contact. I knew he was lying because he was real suspicious and he wouldn't sit still. He was moving, so I got deeper in it, right? We are all truth seekers. We're all truth seekers. Now, whether or what we use the truth for is different, but we're all truth seekers. And some of the things we see here, we have been taught are an opposite of the truth. Somebody who will talk to me about a situation, but will not, I'm suspicious of. Somebody who's fidgety, who can't keep their story straight, I'm suspicious of. So when law enforcement deals with our clients, they're already suspicious of them, but the same thing that makes them a criminal or a defendant makes them a victim. So some of these things overlap, and that's a problem for our clients because then the cops treat them a little harsher. Oh, now I know you're lying to me. I know you're guilty, and everybody treats them that way. Oh, I know you did it. You're right. We all hone in on that fact, but in reality, like, it could be that, or it could be this, could be a combination. Who knows? But I want to point that out because some of those things do overlap, and we see them a lot, or I see them a lot. But this is what I look for when I look for my clients. So then, how do I deal with it, right? First thing is first, I understand it's not their fault. Understand that key first thing, right? Understand how we perceive the world and interact with the world differently. I understand the racial and cultural stigmas involved with it, which we'll talk later about. And I try to just communicate as patient as possible. I try to give them as much space as they need. I try to talk to them and I repeat it and I write it. I try to say it in different ways. Of course, we do medication. Of course, we try those therapies as well, but I can't make my client take medicine, right? But I try to deal with them and understand that, doggone it, I'm getting frustrated, so maybe I should step back and let's try this again a different day. Maybe let's engage their family, somebody they do trust, somebody stabilize with them, right? There's a whole community involvement when it comes to dealing with these clients from my end. Like I said, you judges may not see it. You may not have known that I've engaged mom or sister or brother to talk to this person, but I have, right? You may not have known that I've read all the medical records, but I haven't. So it's a community involvement, but that's how we deal with it. So, I don't know why this is doing that. All right, so here's a few things when we deal with mental illness that we see that we have to overcome. The perceptions of being mentally ill. For some reason, and I understand why, we have made it a negative stigma to be considered mentally ill, right? It's considered weak, and it's not. In fact, I think if you have a mental illness and you go to work every day, you are strong. It's easy to succeed when you don't have a barrier naturally to you, but when you have one and you're still functioning, that's fantastic. But there's a fear and mistrust of people who are mentally ill. They can't control their actions. They did it before, they'll do it again. There is scientific racism, which is another slide we're going to talk about. Stereotype threats, which goes into scientific racism, and there are, of course, concurrent disorders and self-medication. So then lastly, of course, the difference between men and women, children and adults. So we know that studies have shown that African Americans are overdiagnosed with schizophrenia right? They're underdiagnosed with mood disorders. You can see Hispanics and African Americans, they have a lower reported risk of these disorders. They seek treatment less. Asian Americans, the same thing. They seek treatment less. So one of the things we see with cultural minorities is there is a tendency to hide the illness, usually until it's too late. And then cops get involved. And at that point, it's too late, right? We don't seek it out. And even in younger generations, they don't want to be that member of the family that's crazy. But the family's telling them, you're not crazy. Just take your medication. It's okay. It's okay. But these are things that we have to overcome. And so a lot of times you will talk to your clients and you will say like, hey, I got you, you're bipolar. And they'll say, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Take your medication. I don't need it because I am not crazy, is what they say. I am not schizophrenic. Like, sir, I understand, but if you take your medication, we can get the case resolved. We're getting the case resolved, but I'm not schizophrenic. And we see that a lot. We see that hesitation with minorities, cultural minorities, to this system because of ways they were treated and things of that nature. So, did I already skip it? Sorry. I want to go back to this one. Scientific racism. We'll go back to this one. Their history of medical sciences is wrought with great discoveries and great oppression. For example, J. Marion Sims. Anybody heard of that name before? J. Marion Sims? You probably have not, but half of this audience has benefited from him. He was considered the father of OBGYN medicine, right? He had a statue in New York, the father of it. Many of the discoveries he made are still being used today. What most people don't know with J. Marion Sims is he did his experiments on African-American women with zero medication. Having never submitted to an OBGYN exam, but having heard about them, yikes. And he did that routinely, and he would do it like in the movies, in the center stage in front of other doctors, and while the lady's screaming in pain, he'd be like, oh, she's not really feeling that pain. I mean, literally butchered women, but father of OBGYN. We had ideas and understandings, Tuskegee experiment, where African Americans were injected with LSD and syphilis to test its effects on people and never given cures, right? So things like this were done and they were passed down from generation. I heard about this not from school, but from my grandparents. And so there is a mistrust from cultural minorities because we are told by our family of these things that have happened to us, right? And in the pursuit of scientific research, there are beliefs. Black people don't feel pain the same. Studies right now are being put out how Black women in childbirth don't get the same level of medication as white women because it's believed Black women have a higher tolerance for pain, so therefore they don't need it. That's garbage to me, but that studies right now are being done not to support it, but to refute it. But this is scientific racism, right? So then we lead to stereotype threat, which is if you are a cultural minority and you know these things, you for sure do not want to present with any type of symptom that supports it, i.e., as a Black man, I don't want to be presumed as being aggressive. So I don't want to seek medical attention because people will think that I'm crazy and aggressive. And so for sure, I'm going to avoid that. Same thing with the woman. I don't want to perceive with being crazy. And so I will for sure not pursue anything that puts that label on me because I don't want that stereotype threat, that social stigma. And these are things we deal with, right? You have to know it. Many of us knew these things already. We didn't know the label for them, but we knew them. So then, sorry guys, I'm running short. So then we have concurrent disorder versus self-medication, right? It's well documented that people with mental illnesses sometimes can know it and they can self-medicate. They don't like Risperdal, they don't like Haldol, its effects, but they do like the way meth makes them feel. They do feel like other drugs, marijuana, soothes them down. It lets them be them without that backup mental health issue. And so they take their own medication. And that's a fight because these illegal narcotics don't do well with actual mental illness. And it's a fight. And so you have to have these concurrent diagnosis disorders, these treatment programs where you treat not just the mental illness, but the self-diagnosis and the drug use. Alcohol, drugs, we'll see. Some studies have shown that women tend to have more mental health issues than men, but men receive less treatment, right? Men are programmed to be strong. Mental illness is considered a weakness, and we cannot be weak. Men tend to have more delusions of grandeur. So my clients that are mentally ill will tend to believe like they own the world, that are men, that the world is theirs, like they are in control of everything. And this is, the anecdotes, by the way, are just me. The first part of the study, but just all my clients to deal with this is that. And women tend to be more like, I'm pregnant, I'm being assaulted, more victim-oriented feelings. So like I said, when I deal with my clients, this is what I try to do. I'm first and foremost patient, always patient. And I try not to yell, but I'm also human, so sometimes I have bad days too. But I listen, I educate, meaning I try to teach them over and over again in different ways. I read their records, and their records are voluminous. I speak to their family. And if I try to get them stabilized within the Harris County Jail, take their medication, that kind of stuff. If I can get them stable right then and there, I can skip this next part, which I think is necessary but unfortunate. If not, we get them eval for competency. And if they're competent, we go for sanity. If they're not incompetency, we go to the hospital. So incompetency versus insanity. Incompetency basically deals with how is my client's mental condition right now? As they sit in the jail right now, how are they doing? Insanity deals with how was it at the time of the offense, right? I'm assuming you're competent now, so when the offense occurred, what was your mind state then? Incompetency is found in the code 46B. And what we look for incompetency is these kind of 5 factors. The ability to understand the charges, to talk to their attorney and disclose pertinent facts, to help me out with their defense, understand what a judge is, what a defense attorney, bailiff, testifying, that kind of stuff. And when they go to the hospital, they do this game called legal bingo, where they work on that one for sure. They put them in a courtroom, a mock courtroom, and they have them sit at different places and play different roles so they can get an understanding of what it means. Exhibit a courtroom behavior. Are you going to blurt out? Are you going to testify? That kind of thing. Insanity, of course, like I said, is how are we at the time of the offense. So my clients that are now found incompetent or insane by reason of mental illness, not IDD, will go to one of these 8 hospitals or 9 hospitals. The entirety of Texas, and we have like 1 million counties or 256, sends all of their incompetency and insanity people to one of these hospitals. That's where they go. And if you're charged with a violent offense, a statutorily defined violent offense, which includes anything we formerly knew as a 3G offense, any offense with ag in front of it, any offense with sex in it, any offense where you can get a deadly weapon finding, you're going to go to Rusk or Vernon, right? And 2 hospitals for the 200 plus counties of Texas, wait list is huge. You go there and you're there until you're found competent. You're there until you are believed to be safe for the community, which could be 120 days, because incompetency for felonies is 120 days initially with an additional 60 days, so $180 total. And then if you're still not incompetent, you're civilly committed, and that's on a year basis, and you can remain in a hospital for as long as you could have been held in prison. So if it's murder, it's life. If it's ag assault, deadly weapon, it's 20 years, unless you've been enhanced. If it's most drug offenses, it's probably 10 years, that kind of thing. So you're in this hospital until you regain competency or you're no longer a danger to the community, which is a problem because 2 hospitals for the state of Texas is big. So I don't know if you guys can see this chart. It's one of my last slides. This is a chart of Harris County. It's a chart of waitlisted people in Harris County. And you can see some of the names. I gotta get close to read this. But like Eduardo, Shakithia, she's been in the jail for 994 days. She was found incompetent after 868 days. So basically, 80 days into her incompetency, she was arrested. Probably immediately, the attorney was like, there's an issue here. Filed for incompetency, got her evaluated, found her incompetent, and then she's waitlisted 868 days in Harris County Jail, almost 3 years waiting to go to a hospital, right? And the list goes on. And you can see the crime charges here, they're all aggravated. They're all 3G. And they're all going, for the most part, if you look at it, you can see it says 46B 073, 120 days. That's just the initial incompetency. That's just to get restored. That's not civilly committed. So we have clients that we know are going to the hospital, and the family's asking us when are they going. Sometimes the court's asking when are they going, and all we can say is they're on the wait list, right? And that can be a problem. And these are things we deal with, right? And sometimes your clients can start to regain competency, and they can know they need the hospital, and they can say, when am I going to the hospital? And all we can say is, I don't know. And eventually, everybody gets tired of hearing, I don't know. And everybody gets frustrated. So your client sitting in jail for 2 years waiting to go to a hospital is getting tired of sitting in jail waiting to go to the hospital. They want to resolve their case. They want to plead a time served. They know that I've been here for 2 years, I can get time served, but because you've been found incompetent, you can't plea until you're found competent again. And it's like that weird catch-22, because if you're competent, I could plea you right now to 2 years and you be done. But because you're incompetent, I have to send you to the hospital, and you have to wait, and you're still waiting, and that's a process. It's something we go through. A lot of frustration. So once again, patience with us, because we deal with a lot of frustration on our clients' end. And we try our best to help them understand the situation, the program, what's going on, and communicate with the court and not betray confidences, also defend them from the client charge, and there's a lot of work going on. Yes, ma'am.
My question is that with that chart that you just had with the defendants, I was walking past and, in the lobby, and I hear a lot of people just assume that most of these defendants right here are just heavily drugs. That's their life. They're drugs, crime. How many of those people up there just have basic IDD behaviors? The social awkwardness, the people presume just they're shy, they have weird social cues against being just drugs.
So I would say that nobody on this list probably has IDD, because that 46B 073 deals with mental illness. If there's an IDD issue, it's a totally different track we're going on. So nobody here is probably IDD. These are probably all incompetency, but they might have various levels of mental illness. Not everybody presents the same. So you can have some people who are, as one expert put with me, floridly psychotic. And I often repeat it to other colleagues, like just floridly psychotic. And at other times, they're barely there, but they're there. And so with these particular people, they are probably mentally ill for sure. They have not stabilized, and they're just waiting in a hospital, in the jail. Some of them are in the mental health portion of the jail. Some are general population of the jail, but they're just sitting in the Harris County Jail waiting for their name to be called, a bed to free up. And this battle this is Harris County, but I imagine every county has a sheet like this. Yes, ma'am.
Invariably, I have somebody every year, and they've been in the hospital for 7 years, 10 years, 12 years.
Right.
I'll have them on a medication hearing if they're a forensic patient only medication. But invariably, if I'm doing a civil hearing, it's because their charges have been dropped, but they cannot be released because they're violent. There's no placement for them, and so they have already lived at the state hospital for 7 to 12 years, and they will continue living at the state hospital. Our state hospitals are full of forensic patients and former forensic patients who will never regain competency and who are violent and cannot be released into the general population. We need another layer somewhere in there of secure facility for people who are violent, who live at our state hospitals and who cannot ever be released safely.
So I agree completely. Like I said, I could speak on this for days. The first, in my opinion, the first level of contact ought not be jail for mental ill people. It ought not be. We've lost that, but it is. Unfortunately, it is, but it ought not be. And this is also some of the frustrations we felt. So I have this slide right here. It was paraphrased from Rudyard Kipling. Instead of lawyer, he wrote soldier. I put this in here in my presentation because we have talked about clients a lot, but now I want to talk about each other. I want to talk about each other as attorney professionals, as court staff. This business is stressful and it is rough at times, and we are prideful people, all of us across the board. We have some of the highest rates of alcohol abuse, drug use, suicide. We don't let it go. And so I ask everybody here to try to take care of each other, right? Defense, prosecution, judges, we're all just people. And as judges, you are in a unique position to see both sides and help. So while we are talking about mental illnesses for clients and resources for them, let's also remember each other. So let's try to take care of each other as well so that we can help lower our suicide rates. Let's try to help get rid of the stigma of attorneys with mental illness and attorneys with issues like that. Thank you.